Professor Tae-Wan stood tall at the presentation podium. His six-fingered hands adjusted the holographic display. The blue glow lit up his orange skin. The room was full of the greatest scientific minds from 27 different worlds. They all came to hear his new research. "My fellow scientists," Tae-Wan began. His voice was deep and confident. "Today I present the results of my 10-year study on species survival rates." The audience watched closely. Tae-Wan was famous for his work on how different beings adapted to new places. He came from a desert planet with 3 suns. His people had evolved to survive in extreme heat. Maybe that was why he was so interested in what made species live or die in harsh places. "As you know, the humans have announced their plan to settle on Glacius 9. He paused and looked around the room. Some of the aliens whispered to each other. Everyone had heard about the humans' new colony plan. Tae-Wan pressed a button. A large image of a white and blue planet appeared above him. Glacius 9 has temperatures that drop to -120 degrees. It has storms that last for weeks. The sun is visible for only 2 hours each day. He showed more images: ice caves, frozen lakes, mountains covered in snow that never melted. "I have created a mathematical model." A complex equation filled the screen. "It shows the survival chances of carbon-based life forms on Glacius 9. For humans, the probability of colony failure within 1 standard year is 98.7%. The audience gasped. That was almost certain death. An elder scientist with green skin and 4 eyes raised his hand. "Have you shared this information with the humans?" Tae-Wan nodded. "The Galactic Council sent my full report to Earth 6 months ago. The humans thanked us for our concern but said they would proceed anyway." This caused a stir in the room. A female scientist with silver scales laughed. "Typical humans. They never listen to reason." "Indeed," said Tae-Wan. "Their stubborn nature is well documented, but this time it will lead to their doom." He showed more slides, detailed analyses of human biology, their thin skin that offered little protection against cold, their need for constant warmth, their fragile lungs that would struggle in the thin, icy air of Glacius 9. "The humans believe their technology will save them," Tae-Wan continued. "They plan to build heated habitats, special suits for outside work. But my calculations show that one major storm could destroy their power systems. One equipment failure could freeze them all in hours." The room was silent now. Everyone was picturing the human colony. All those people dying on a frozen world far from home. "I will monitor their attempt," said Tae-Wan. "Their colony ships are already on the way. They plan to land next month. I have prepared my research vessel to observe from orbit. While I take no pleasure in their coming failure, it will provide valuable data on the limits of adaptability." A scientist at the back stood up. "But what if they survive?" Tae-Wan smiled. His sharp teeth gleamed in the light. "They won't. It's mathematically impossible. My model accounts for every variable." After the presentation, many scientists came to congratulate Tae-Wan. They praised his thorough work, his attention to detail, but one old professor who had studied humans for centuries looked troubled. "You missed something," he said quietly. "Impossible," Tae-Wan replied. "My model is perfect." The old professor shook his head slowly. "There's always something with humans, something you can't put in an equation." Tae-Wan dismissed this comment. 1 week later, he was on his research vessel, entering orbit around Glacius 9. The 3 human colony ships had already arrived. From his viewport, he watched as they began their descent through the swirling white clouds. "And so it begins," he said to himself. He opened a new file on his computer and typed the title, "Predictable Failure: Human Hubris on Glacius 9. He was sure it would be his greatest work yet, a study of how nature always wins against those who ignore scientific warnings. He had no idea that he was about to learn the most important lesson of his career. The massive colony ships broke through the thick clouds of Glacius 9. Ice crystals formed instantly on their metal hulls. From his orbiting research vessel, Professor Taiwan watched with scientific interest. His 6 eyes blinked rapidly as he recorded everything. Day 1 of human settlement attempt. He spoke into his recorder. The fools have arrived. On the surface, the first ship touched down. Its landing legs crunched into the thick ice. Strong winds blew snow against its sides. The temperature outside was -90 degrees. Inside the lead ship, Commander Ji Young looked at the screens showing the bleak landscape. Her dark eyes narrowed with determination. She had led 3 space missions before, but this was different. This was not an exploration. This was meant to be their new home. "Begin deployment sequence," she ordered. Her voice was calm despite the danger. The crew moved quickly. They had trained for 2 years for this moment. Large habitat modules detached from the ships. Special ice drilling machines began cutting into the surface. Prefabricated tunnels were laid down, connecting what would become their new colony. Taiwan zoomed in with his ship's cameras. "Interesting approach," he muttered, "but ultimately useless. Their equipment will fail when the first major storm hits." As if the planet heard him, a wall of white appeared on the horizon. The weather satellites had predicted this, but not so soon. A massive storm was approaching the landing site. "Incoming storm," shouted the colony's weather officer. "Estimated. Arrival in 40 minutes. Ji Young's face remained steady. "Move up the schedule. Get the main power core underground now. All non-essential personnel inside the ships." The colonists worked faster. They moved like a well-trained army. Some wore special thermal suits that glowed with heat elements. Others operated large machines that cut deeper into the ice. From orbit, Taiwan watched with surprise. "They're adapting their plans," he noted. "Still, it won't be enough." The storm hit with incredible force. Winds of 200 miles per hour sent ice shards flying like bullets. The temperature dropped another 30 degrees. The colony disappeared under a white blanket of swirling snow. "And now we wait to count the dead," Taiwan said coldly. 3 hours later, the storm passed. Taiwan adjusted his cameras, expecting to see destruction. Instead, he saw movement. Humans in their thermal suits were emerging from the ships and underground shelters. They immediately resumed work. "Impossible," he whispered. Days passed. The humans established their base. They built a main dome and connected it with tunnels to smaller structures. Solar collectors and wind turbines were set up to generate power. They even began mapping expeditions into the surrounding ice fields. On the 7th day, disaster struck. A ground transport vehicle carrying 3 engineers broke down 10 miles from the base. Their emergency beacon activated, but another storm was coming. By all of Taiwan's calculations, they would freeze to death before help could arrive. "Commander, we have a situation," reported the communications officer to Ji Young. "Seo Jin's team is stranded in Sector 4. Their vehicle's heating system failed." Ji Young checked the weather map. "How long until the storm hits them?" 30 minutes, maybe less. "Prepare the rescue skimmer." "Ma'am, the skimmer can't fly in these winds." Ji Young stood up. "Then we go on foot." From his ship, Taiwan watched as a team of 5 humans left the safety of the colony. They carried emergency supplies and were connected by lines. They moved slowly through the deep snow toward their stranded comrades. "Fascinating," he said. "They're sacrificing 5 more lives to attempt the rescue of 3 already doomed individuals. Highly irrational behavior." The storm hit. The rescue team disappeared. From his thermal sensors, Taiwan recorded the time and made a note that 8 human deaths would be confirmed when the storm cleared. But 12 hours later, when the skies cleared, his sensors detected 8 heat signatures moving back toward the colony. Somehow, they had all survived. "This defies my models," Taiwan muttered. He zoomed in closer as the humans reached their base. Some were limping, one was being carried, but they were alive. Taiwan updated the title of his research paper. Unexpected Developments, Human Resilience on Glacius 9. For the first time in his career, his calculations had been wrong, and he needed to understand why. 6 months had passed since the humans landed on Glacius 9. Professor Taiwan still orbited the frozen planet in his research vessel. He had not returned home as planned. The colony below had changed his careful plans. Month 6, Day 12. He recorded in his journal. The human settlement continues to exist against all probability. He adjusted his viewing screen. The human colony had grown. What started as a small cluster of domes was now an organized network. They had built tunnels deep into the ice. Smoke rose from vents showing that they had mastered the planet's resources somehow. In the main colony dome, Commander Ji Young reviewed the latest expansion plans. Her advisors sat around a table made from local ice, coated with a clear resin. They had developed from native plants found beneath the ice. The new thermal suits are working well, reported Chief Engineer Heywan. He placed a sample of shimmering fabric on the table. We've incorporated the glowing minerals from the eastern glacier. They absorb even the smallest amount of radiation from the sun and convert it to heat. Ji Young touched the fabric. It warmed instantly. Excellent. How many suits can we make? Enough for everyone, including the children. Heywan. Days later, a massive storm approached the colony. Taewan's instruments showed it would be the worst yet. His calculations predicted that the colony's power systems would fail. The temperature inside their habitats would drop to fatal levels within hours. This will be the end, he said grimly. The storm hit with incredible force. Ice and snow battered the colony. The main power generator sparked and shut down as Taewan had predicted. Inside the main dome, warning alarms blared. Primary power failure, shouted the operations officer. Ji Young acted quickly. Activate backup systems. Get everyone into thermal suits. But the backup generators were failing too. Ice had damaged critical components. The temperature inside the dome began to fall rapidly. We need to replace the damaged regulator coils, said Heywan. But they're stored in Supply Dome 3. Ji Young looked at the map. Supply Dome 3 was 200 meters away, through the worst of the storm. I'll go, she said, pulling on her thermal suit. Not alone, said Heywan. We'll form a chain. From his ship, Taewan watched in amazement as dozens of humans emerged into the deadly storm. They formed a human chain from the main dome to the supply building. Each person stood just within reach of the next. The first person entered Supply Dome 3 and emerged with a box of parts. They passed it hand to hand through the chain, fighting against winds that could throw them into the air. Taewan's sensors showed that their body temperatures were dropping dangerously. Yet still they stood, passing the critical parts along the line until they reached the main dome. Impossible, he whispered. They should be dead. All of them. But 6 hours later, the colony lights came back on. The humans had repaired their systems. They had survived. Taewan looked at his equations again. Something was missing. Some factor he hadn't considered. He made a decision. Computer, prepare landing sequence, he said. I need to see this for myself. Professor Taewan's research vessel landed on the icy surface of Glacius 9. The wind howled around his ship as he prepared to exit. He had broken scientific protocol by coming here. Direct contact with study subjects was forbidden. But he needed answers. He put on his special environment suit. His species could not survive even 1 minute in the cold outside. He checked the oxygen mixture and temperature controls 3 times. Then he opened the door. The cold hit him like a physical blow even through his protective gear. His breath caught in his throat. How could anything live here? In the distance he could see the human colony. It was larger than it had appeared from orbit. Lights glowed warmly against the endless white landscape. He activated his communicator. This is Professor Taewan of the Galactic Science Academy. I request permission to approach your colony. There was a long silence. Then a female voice responded. This is Commander Ji Young. We've been aware of your ship for months. You may approach. Follow the lighted path. Small lights appeared in the snow, forming a line to the main entrance. Taewan walked carefully. Each step was difficult in the deep snow. As he reached the main airlock, 2 humans in thermal suits met him. They didn't seem bothered by the cold. They escorted him inside. The airlock hissed closed. Warm air surrounded him. Taewan relaxed slightly. The inner door opened and he entered the human colony. It was nothing like he had imagined. The space was full of light and warmth. Plants grew in special containers along the walls. People moved about purposefully. Some looked at him with curiosity, but most just continued their work. Commander Ji Young waited for him. She was shorter than he expected. Her dark hair was cut short in a practical style. Her eyes studied him carefully. "Welcome to Glacius 9 Colony, Professor. We've read your research about us and very interesting predictions." Taewon felt uncomfortable. "You were not supposed to know about my observations." Ji Young smiled. "We intercepted your transmissions months ago. Your paper about our predictable failure, made for entertaining reading during our dark evenings." She led him through the colony. Taewon was amazed. They had built an entire underground city. Tunnels connected different sections. There were living quarters, work areas, and even a space where children played. "This is impossible," he said. "My calculations were based on incomplete data." Ji Young finished for him. "Would you like to see what you missed?" She took him to a large room where people were working with strange glowing crystals, the same material he had seen in their suits. "We discovered that these crystals absorb and store energy efficiently," she explained. "We use them for everything now: heating, power storage, even communication." "But that's not what confuses me most," Taewon said. "Your people go outside in conditions that should kill you. I saw humans stand in a lethal storm for hours. How?" Ji Young led him to another section of the colony. In a clear-walled room, a group of adults were teaching several children. The children wore lightweight clothing, much thinner than the heavy thermal suits. "Watch," Ji Young said. A panel in the room opened, letting in the freezing outside air. The temperature dropped instantly. The children shivered but remained standing. They began breathing exercises. Soon their skin took on a slightly pink glow. "What are they doing?" Taewon asked in shock. "Learning to control their body temperature," Ji Young explained. "Humans have always had this ability to some degree, but we can develop it with practice." The children practiced for 10 more minutes before the room was warmed again. "Your calculations were perfect, Professor," Ji Young said. "But you forgot one thing. You measured our physical limits as they were when we arrived. You didn't account for our ability to adapt." "Adapt in 6 months? That's genetically impossible." "It's not genetic, at least not yet. It's behavioral, mental. We change our practices, train our responses, and pass knowledge to the next generation." Taewon thought about the human chain. In the storm, they should have frozen to death, but they hadn't. "Show me everything," he said. His scientific curiosity overwhelmed his embarrassment at being wrong. For the next week, Taewon observed the colony. He learned how they had befriended the crystal creatures, which they called glaciads. These beings helped the humans find underground heat sources and minerals. He watched the children born on Glacius 9 who already showed remarkable resistance to cold. They weren't genetically different from their parents, but they were learning from birth to adapt to this world. Everything he thought he knew about species adaptation was changing before his eyes. 1 year had passed since Professor Taewon first landed on Glacius 9. Today he stood once again before the Galactic Science Academy, but everything was different. The room was packed beyond capacity. Scientists from hundreds of worlds had come to hear him speak. "Distinguished colleagues," he began, "I present to you my new theory of adaptive intelligence." He touched a control panel, and images of the human colony appeared. It had grown into a small city now. Dome structures stretched across the ice. Gardens flourished inside transparent shelters. Transport vehicles moved along cleared pathways. 1 year ago, I stood here and predicted with 98.7% certainty that humans could not survive on Glacius 9. He paused. I was wrong. A murmur ran through the crowd. Professor Taewon was famous for his mathematical precision. He had never admitted an error before. My calculations were correct regarding the physical limitations of human biology, he continued, but I failed to account for what I now call the psychological adaptation factor. He showed videos of humans working outside in the deadly cold. They moved with confidence, their thermal suits now much lighter than before. They worked alongside the crystal creatures, the glaciads, who helped them dig for minerals. Humans don't. Just change their environment, Taewon explained. They change themselves. Their adaptability isn't just technological, it's psychological. They embrace challenges that would make other species retreat. In the front row, an older scientist raised a hand. Are you suggesting they evolved new traits in just 1 year? That's biologically impossible. Not physical evolution, Taewon replied. Mental evolution. They train their minds to overcome physical limitations. They develop techniques and pass them to their children. Each generation improves on the last. He displayed his new mathematical model. It included factors for determination, creativity, and something he called collective problem solving. With this model, the survival probability of the Glacius 9 colony is not 1.3% but 89.4%. The audience was silent, processing this dramatic revision. On Glacius 9, Ji Young, now Governor Ji Young, prepared for her journey to the Galactic Council. The colony had thrived beyond anyone's expectations. They now exported rare minerals and ice farming techniques to 3 nearby systems. The Glacids had become valuable allies. They could detect underground heat sources and mineral deposits. In return, the humans helped them build better shelters against the worst storms. Most remarkable were the children born on Glacius 9. They could withstand temperatures that would have killed their parents when they first arrived. Not through genetic change, but through training from birth. Ji Young's shuttle lifted off, heading for the Galactic Council meeting. In her briefcase was a formal request for humanity to join as a full member species. Back at the Science Academy, Taewon concluded his presentation. The lesson of Glacius 9 is clear, he said. The greatest adaptation is not physical. It is the ability to see problems as challenges rather than barriers. He showed one final image. A human child, born on Glacius 9, standing in the snow, with only light clothing. Beside her stood a Glaciad. They were building something together. Humans. Call it determination, Taewon said. The refusal to accept limits, the belief that there is always a solution. This psychological trait gives them strength that no equation can measure. The audience rose to their feet, applauding the new theory. Taewon had changed scientific thinking about adaptation forever. That same day, Governor Ji Young arrived at the Galactic Council. The massive chamber fell silent as she walked to the speaking platform. Many council members had bet against human survival on Glacius 9. Esteemed representatives, she began, I bring greetings from the people of Glacius 9. We request recognition as the newest member of the galactic community. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of beings from 100 different worlds. We have much to learn from you, she continued. But perhaps we also have something to teach, about facing the impossible, about thriving where others only survive. From his seat in the observation gallery, Professor Taewon watched with pride. He was no longer just an observer. He had become an advocate for human potential. As the council voted unanimously to accept humanity's application, Taewon reflected on his journey. The ice planet hadn't just taught him about humans. It had taught him about science itself, that sometimes the most important discoveries come when our certainties are proven wrong. The end.